Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL. And before we get into today's conversation, I want to take 30 seconds to talk about something that really matters to me. TRXL exists because I believe this industry deserves better conversations. No agenda, no corporate backing, just honest, in-depth dialogue with the people actually shaping where AEC is headed. More than 25,000 of you listen to this show, and less than 50 of you are paying supporters of what I'm doing here. And I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because if this kind of independent media matters to you, if these conversations have ever changed how you think, what you're doing, or maybe introduced you to someone worth knowing, then the most direct way to keep it going is to become a TRXL Plus member. $12 a month, ad-free episodes, and the full Leadership Edge newsletter with my deep dives, and the knowledge that you're one of the people making this possible. Head over to the website at trxl.co and click the join button. And either way, I'm really glad you're here. Now let's get into today's conversation. In this episode, I welcome Joachim Viktil. Joachim is an architect whose career path reflects a growing tension in the profession between how architects are trained to think and how they're actually allowed to work. This journey moves through practice, technology, and product thinking, and along the way, it exposes some uncomfortable truths about how architectural firms value time, output, and innovation. Joachim brings a thoughtful, candid perspective shaped by lived experience inside the system, not commentary from the outside. He's also the CEO of Reope, a company focused on helping architecture and engineering firms better understand how work actually flows through their organizations. Reope looks beyond surface-level metrics like utilization and billable hours, and instead helps teams see where time, effort, and expertise are being lost inside complex workflows. The goal is not to make people work faster, it's to create visibility, alignment, and leverage, keyword right there, leverage, so firms can make smarter decisions about process, staffing, and technology investments. Even though we get around to unpacking Reope later in the conversation, it's an important lens through which much of Joachim's perspective is shaped. In this episode, we explore the realities of architectural practice that rarely get discussed openly. We talk about the hidden cost of staying perpetually busy, why billable hours reward activity over leverage, and how architects, despite being trained as systems thinkers, are often boxed into producing deliverables rather than improving the systems that create them. A key theme from this conversation and many others on the podcast is the disconnect that comes up over and over, which is firms say they want innovation, but structure their businesses around utilization. They hire systems thinkers, then confine them to linear workflows. Over time, the people most capable of creating leverage are the ones who quietly start looking elsewhere. So this episode has a clear signal for leaders. If your most curious people feel underutilized, that's not a retention problem. It's a systems problem. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so please be sure to check them out. You can find them directly in your podcast app if you are a paid supporter of TRXL Plus. And if you're a free member, you can find them over on the website, which is trxl.co, which is where you can also learn more about becoming a supporting member. So, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Joachim Viktil. Joachim, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. It's great to pronounce your name correctly. Maybe the first time. For me, it was the first time, not for you. Welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Evan.
So you were telling me a little bit of your story ahead of time, and then I cut you off because I want to hear it in real time the first time. And it sounds like you've had an interesting journey to where you are now at Reope.
Yeah, so I trained as an engineer, a little bit of structures, civil, and got right into design management, really, in a large engineering services company. And after a few years of that, good fun, I learned a little bit of each engineering discipline and a little bit of architecture, because a lot of the projects we did were engineering-led. And that brought me into a more sales marketing role, and eventually into some strategy, M&A stuff, and then people management. So over 12 years in engineering services, I got to take on a lot of different roles in different countries. And at some point in time, I got into digitalization and innovation a little bit by accident, but it really caught my interest when I saw the power of software, how it scales, and how the expertise of the engineers and architects I worked with didn't scale through humans alone, but software came with that magic ability to bring your expertise around the world and to many people.
Could you elaborate on that experience that you had? I'm curious what it was that you saw there that was magic.
Yeah, it's this challenge that you have in, I think, all these knowledge-based companies where you're trying your best as a leader to bring your best people around to the most challenging projects. And there's a few people that are kind of at the peak of this pyramid of excellence, if you will. And you can't really clone them. You can't really ask them to work more and more and more. Then they burn out, and you don't retain them. They leave.
Wait. That sounds Scandinavian to me. That doesn't sound American to me right there. It's like it literally is the reward for more hard work. For hard work is more hard work in the U.S., I think. So
yeah,
it's interesting that you say that as a leader, as somebody who was transitioning into leadership and actually saying that out loud.
Yeah. I mean, it was, back in school, of course, if you finished your math assignment, you got more math. So that part's familiar. But I've also seen excellent people who just burnt out and couldn't really do anything else. And I think as a leader, that's something that's kind of something you feel. You care about the people that are around you and the people you try to lead and create interesting workplaces for. So that's something that's always kind of in the back of my mind. How do we balance this brilliance that some people just have in exuberance with the extreme need there is for this expertise? And for me, at some point along the road, when I was a kind of a head of department with 30 people in my team for a while, and then got up to a director level with around 100 engineers. And it was really hard to scale those people that I needed in every project to just get the project started in the right way and make sure when the hard stuff happens that they're there and fix things. And then somehow, you can codify their expertise, and you can parts of it, you can kind of bring into software and bring it to everyone in all the teams so they can benefit from this expertise a little bit at least.
You're not my generation. You're definitely younger than me. And so I'm curious. Okay, there's two things that I want to talk about just to linger on this for a minute. The first one is you talked about seeing maybe people burn out or just trying to prevent it. And I think back to my experience, and I think about, what I just said about the reward for hard work is more hard work. And so the high achievers were definitely like overworked, but they hid it so well. I feel like you could sense it in the cynicism. You could sense it in the comments, but it was just expected. Like, yeah, this is what a professional is in architecture. And what I mean by they hid it was, it's like we didn't talk about burnout. We didn't talk about the quality of their experience, the quality of their life, what was enriching about it or not. And I feel like, working really hard and spending all the hours like kind of has some sense of enrichment to it. It's like the quality is your dedication to the work, and that it's somehow feeding you to keep you going, which I think is completely different than what you're talking about. And I think because I mentioned you're younger than me, that you saw that. And again, another thing that I think that leads into the second point is you're leading a department of 30 and that's growing at a young age. And so is this more of a this doesn't happen in the US. It didn't used to, for sure. I mean, architects started leading teams much later in their career, right? And so I'm just curious if that's more of a Scandinavian thing as well. Is that like bringing in or recognizing leadership ability and bringing that in early and giving you responsibility earlier?
Potentially, but I think, I had some really good leaders I worked for over the years who recognized that or gave me some chances. And then some of those went okay. So, I was always in the intersection of this technical disciplines, engineering disciplines, or software experts. And I had kind of enough that I understood what was going on and then connected that to people. So I was able to go to some clients, varying degrees of understanding of engineering or architecture and explain what this means to them. I was able to get engineers that, some of them are fabulous at working together. Some are definitely not, and get all those in a room and get them to work together. So this was kind of some of the skills that I was really focusing on. And that got noticed by one of the directors who gave me a chance at a role that, was maybe 10 years before I naturally would have had that role. And when that went okay, then I got some other opportunities as well. I think the company I was in was just really good at kind of building a leadership pipeline and giving young people the chance to try this leadership thing and recognizing that this is, in a way, a discipline in its own. You can become an excellent engineer or a brilliant architect. It doesn't necessarily mean you are great at leading people.
For sure.
There's no causality there. So I think it's a skill that anyone can build if they work on it. But it's not something that, life experience automatically makes you a better leader, because then, my wife's grandpa, 94, he would be one of the best leaders I would know, but it's not necessarily the case.
What do you mean you focused on it? So was it actually something you were pursuing the study of, was communication and leadership at that earlier age? Or was it just something that you just noticed, and so therefore you were kind of more open to maybe developing that?
Yeah, it was definitely an interest of mine. I remember during my master's degree, a long time ago, I came across this paper that was ancient. It was about communication, but it was written by an electrical engineer. And it was just this super simple thing of how you have a sender and a message and a receiver, and it made sense in electrical engineering terms, and it made sense in communication terms. Mm-hmm. And to me, like, something clicked. There's something engineering that to communication as well. You can kind of distill it down to its part and then solve each part. So that was something that always interested me, really. And then I got into a talent program, and I got a mentor and a coach, a leadership coach after a while. So I always sought to improve the way I was leading people.
Was that something that you invested in monetarily, like that leadership coach, or was it something that just you sought out and you, through relationships, you made happen? Because I think a lot of times, I've been in this situation myself many times, where it's just like, even my wife will be like, I think you should find somebody. And that means paying somebody to do this, which is a valuable service to help me get better at something. And then there's just kind of this natural allergy to wanting to pay for that, when obviously there's tons of information out there available, but I'd have to piece it together, et cetera. Find a course, I don't know, find books, but I'm interested if that's something you paid for, if that was something that you really invested in yourself in that way.
Yeah, so it was something that I invested time into, but I did at the time go to my boss and say, I need this. It was maybe January 2020. I was stepping into my first director role. And then I had kind of 3 leaders reporting to me, and around in our teams, there were around 100 people across 3 countries. And then, the pandemic happened. Everyone stays at home. Each country has its own rules. And it was a lot to take on in that kind of first role as leading other leaders. And I also realized the 3 people working for me were all men. My boss was a man. His boss was a man. And I actually went to my boss and said, hey, I have someone in my network. At that time, I also spent a year away from the business to take an MBA full time. And in the alumni network, I found someone who was a very experienced leader in a completely different field, like biotech and pharma. And she had lots of experience in leadership, and then turned into leadership coaching towards the end of her career. And she was a tremendous help to me, just the conversations and being able to talk about everything and anything in the business without guarding what you're saying. Sure. And without always having in the back of the mind, like, is this information that will come back to me in a way or somehow hurt my standing or position. When you're on each level of leadership in a large organization comes with new challenges. So you always have to be a little bit careful who you trust with what.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, I'm glad we did that little digression there, because I mean, that's pretty fascinating that you sought that out, again, because I think a lot of times there's kind of this, I don't know, maybe it's just ego. It's just something that is just like, oh, I don't really need that. But to your point, like what it's led to and the opportunities through building those skills intentionally. And I agree, leadership is a skill. It's not an innate thing. Like you can develop it, and it should be treated that way, I believe, because it is a burden. Like I've talked about it on the podcast before. Leadership is not like something that many people should or want to aspire to because it's difficult, and you take the responsibility for the people who are reporting to you and people that you're interacting with, because that's comes with the role, and because it's a role, I do believe that it's a skill that can be learned. It's not something that you should just jump into willy-nilly because it's not. I don't know. What do you think about that as far as like being a leader and just feeling that burden?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of thrown into leadership without really having any interest in it, or necessarily, having the interest to devote time and energy into bettering themselves in this field. And then I think it has the potential to hurt people around them. And myself, I'm a very relationship-oriented person. I value the people I meet, the relationship I forge. And lately, actually, I've been thinking a lot about the value of kindness. Some of the people I meet, conferences or working in the customer organizations or in my team, are kind, and it's noticeably different than average. So it's kind of kinder than average in a way.
Noticeably. Yeah, that's the key word, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And just a heartfelt conversation around the topic that you and the person you're talking to cares about, devoting a little bit of your energy and focus doesn't necessarily cost you anything, but having the capacity to be kind is something I've come to appreciate more and more. Especially also working internationally, we rely even more on people you know and can trust. If you stay in your corner of the country, then it's maybe a little bit easier to say, we're from the same corner of this country, you can probably trust each other. But then you go abroad and you find out, people are different everywhere, and people are really, really brilliantly good at what they do. But you need to find people you can trust, and then I think kindness goes a long way.
Do you feel like that's cultural and regional in any way? Like, I've definitely heard of people say, well, I went to X city and the people there were so nice, or I went to X city and it was a horrible experience. It was just more of a vibe, right? That's why I kind of linking it to culture of an area where people are influencing each other in certain ways. Do you feel like it's something like that, or do you feel like it's really more disparate, disconnected?
I think it's to some extent, but it's also quite like individual. When you kind of also, like, I do a fair bit of recruiting, and during recruiting as well, the way people talk about others is kind of an indication if they're, as individuals, are generous, or if they're more focused on the negative sides of people, or hung up on really boosting their ego and promoting themselves, or if they're more interested in contributing to a team and being part of something. So I think
it's more of a personal value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was actually surprised. Back in May, I came over to New York for KPF Tech Week, and I had a bunch of meetings with different architecture firms in the city. And there I found like lots of generous people, which I was surprised. I was kind of from the other side of the ocean. Europe is a strange place. I found people there were kind of referencing me to other people I should talk to. So going to talk to someone in big, then they said, oh, you should meet this guy in shop. And then, it kind of, my week of meetings got more and more intense as longer the week went, which was really nice.
Yeah, people were looking out for you and they saw something that they thought, of course you want to share that around. That's why I wonder if it's cultural, because I've been in situations in offices where attitudes are contagious in some way, right? And so somebody's really cynical and negative and whatever, and you can see it affect a team and start to bring everybody on that team down. And then you can also see the opposite, because and it takes a level of vigilance, I think, to maintain the kindness that you're talking about, because it is so easy to be influenced by others. You have to really hold the line when it comes to that, to say, like, no, the bar's here and we have to keep it at the bar or higher, because you can also see the opposite. You could see that starting to bring the level up around you as well, right? It is an influence that you can also have.
Yeah, and I think as a leader, you can direct and push to get things done. And you can lead from the front and you can do all the things, but it matters how you do it as well. If you listen to people and bring their ideas in, even if you think that you might have the best idea in the room, there could be value to listening to other people in the room. They might surprise you. And some people I find have very little interest. If they have the right answer, they're going to stick to it and just, kind of lead from the front in a way, but sometimes just shutting their ears to what's behind them.
Sure.
And I don't think that's the right way of doing it. I think you should listen to the people around you and bring people along instead.
This episode is made possible with support from Avail. Is your firm managing architectural, landscape, interiors, and engineering content? Avail's all-in-one content management solution stretches across all disciplines, file types, and content locations so production teams can find everything they need all in one place. Thanks to Avail's desktop application and Revit, AutoCAD, and Civil 3D plugins, teams can consistently find and reuse all types of content, from specifications and calculations to 3D models and plans. As a result, standards-compliant models and drawings are easier to create, the documentation process is less chaotic, new hires are easier to onboard, and projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. Visit getavail.com to request a demo. That's getavail.com to request a demo. My thanks to Avail for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation. And why? I mean, you said how, and I think why is another thing where it's like, what's the point? Why are we doing this? And there's going to be some reasons that resonate better than others when it comes through, like how that information is delivered. Like, okay, you're going to push your team to do something. Why are we doing this? And there's a book called Drive from Daniel Pink, famous book in leadership circles for sure. And he talks about motivation, and he talks about even like what great leadership looks like in certain situations when you know there's a deadline, okay? And the leader could choose to hang out with the team and help get things done, or they could go home for the night because they're not technically having their hands in the work. They're kind of overseeing and orchestrating. And he just talks about kind of a subtle shift with a leader to say, look, guys, this is going to suck, right? It's going to be difficult. We are going to have to push, do whatever. But just acknowledging it up front made such a huge difference in the outcome. To say, okay, like because there's a what's the right word? It's like morale, right? Morale of the team, again, kind of referencing this contagion idea of it bleeding into others. If you can say, okay, look, everybody, this is going to be difficult, but we're going to do it. I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to be the person who gets you whatever you need. I'm going to cut the red tape. I'm going to get the pizza. I'm going to get the coffee. I'm going to run the prints for you. I'm going to do whatever you need me to do, because they don't necessarily have their hands in the work, but they're there and they're saying, this is going to be hard, but we're going to do it together. We're going to achieve it. That boosts the morale in a much different way than saying, see you guys in the morning. I hope you hit your deadline, right? I mean, those are two very different ways to approach the situation, but just even acknowledging it up front that it's going to be difficult, but we're going to do this together, what made a huge difference.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
I think you also touched, briefly on the why side of things. Like, it also needs to be meaning in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think and in the industry we're in, there's, and I'm going to sound very judgmental now, but I think there are good and bad, like end goals to pursue in a sense, where, we always want a better built environment. That's always kind of what we're striving for in a way.
Like a dissatisfaction with the way things are, maybe.
Yeah, you could say that. And I think it's, if you look a little bit further, we're trying to prevent, there's the risk of the sixth extinction, the biodiversity loss that we're facing. There's the whole net zero thing as well with the climate crisis that's coming. And if we as, designers and shapers of the built environment are not have that as our end goal, that like somewhere in our mindset that needs to have some space and be kind of, that's why we're doing things. We're not doing things to, sell a little bit more single-use plastic cups. No, that's not the industry we're in. We're trying to make buildings that, stand there for longer so we don't have to rebuild all the time. And we're trying to use better materials and better design processes and all these things. I think it matters that, what's that why at the end of the chain of whys, in a sense, so that you don't just do tech because software is cool and you like tech, but the tech's going to be used for something. And hopefully it's going to be used for something that ends up with a better built environment. And hopefully that's going to have a positive impact on the climate crisis and the biodiversity extinction.
Yeah, the tech part, it should not be the why. It should be in service to the why. I don't think anybody, well, I should not generalize because I don't know. I just speak for myself, I guess. Like, I didn't get into the tech side of architecture to do more tech. I didn't get into it so that I could play with these tools all the time or try to enforce their use upon others, for example, like that a lot of people have to do. No, like the purpose is architecture. The purpose is to create things that elevate, enhance people's lives. I mean, that's the value of what space can do for people in different ways. Is the kinds of projects that I worked on. And that is what you're ultimately in service to. And this happens to be okay, that's where we're going. How do we get there? And then technology plays a role in that, right? So to get back to that why, and what, as a leader, do you keep bringing that up? Because to me, that it's like the North Star, but we have to keep reorienting people toward the North Star because it's easy in the day-to-day to kind of take our eyes away from that.
Yeah, and I think it's for a lot of people, and myself included, the first few years, I was just wanted to work in challenging, fun projects and get design done and see what is happening on the construction site. It's fun to go out and be amongst the machines and see the digging going on and the concrete coming up and all that. But after the years wore on a little bit, I came to appreciate more and more that there was some kind of long-term vision for the company I was in. It was to help societies and nature flourish. And, that became more and more important for me. It became over the years, a reason to stay longer with that company. So I think it's, of course, you need to have a fun, challenging thing to work on. And that's going to sustain you for a while. But hopefully you kind of mature into someone who cares about the meaning of the work you do. And at some point, the legacy that you leave behind as well. And then I think it's important that those aligns with your values, and that it is something that sustains you and is positive for the world around you as well. So I think that's hugely important.
How generic was that purpose? I'm curious because there's some companies who have really generic taglines that they are applying to their culture as the purpose, and I wonder if that matters. I mean, I guess that's my question is. What was that value system that aligned with you, and how specific was it or wasn't it?
Yeah, in this, at least the management theories I've seen is a bit. It's not super inspiring, to be frank. It's as long as you have values, you're okay. But what the values are doesn't matter. They need to be there. But if you go more for the long-term vision, I think you need to be very precise on what you do and what you offer. Like in Reope, we have a very small niche where some of the best people in the world when it comes to coding for geometry and helping architects with that. That's what we do. It's very precise. It's very specific. But then we also have this ambition to some of the talent we free up, some of the computational designers, architects, engineers, that they get to spend their time on creating a more sustainable environment. And then when we see opportunities to work on sustainability-oriented projects, we jump on those, we prioritize those. When we talk about which projects are sensitive to overruns, like we spend too much on this project, but there's a benefit to the sustainability side. So we're much more tolerant to letting that project run over than another project where there's nothing that could boost that. I think those small decisions in the day-to-day can signal that this is important in the long run. We're not going to solve it this month, but it's something we want to contribute to a little bit in all the small decisions that we do. And that's really hard if you don't know at the end of the line, at the end of all those whys that you kind of stack up. If you ask why enough times, like my 3-year-old daughters ask why all the time, at some point you always get to, because that's how it is.
Yeah.
In business, I hope you get to that because we need to save the planet. And there's a couple whys in between, but it needs to be in there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that too. I think if it's too generic, if it's just like design because design, it's great. It's better. I don't feel like it's enough because it's too open to interpretation, and it's hard to actually know what you're aligning your values to when there's so many different ways that could be interpreted. And I love this idea of kind of working at a place that you align with their values. That to me makes it more than a job at that point, right? It's something that feeds your soul in some way and is not just a thing because you have to go do it. And there's a lot of that in this industry, but there's also a lot of the opposite. So it's tricky. And so how big is your team at Reop?
So now we're 10 people, becoming 11 in February. So it's a very small team. But someone told me the other day we're punching above our weight, which is I don't box myself. I take it as a compliment.
Right.
And one of the things I get like some examples of the work we do. Over the last 8 years, we built a lot of Revit add-ins, Rhino plugins. That's kind of the thing that we have done a lot of, some web stuff. And then, we have 101, 102 repositories in our GitHub account with things we built over the years. Mm-hmm. So in like half a year ago, we had a chat with KPF, and they said, oh, we saw that you have this daylight compliance checker that checks against this building code. Now, could you retrofit that to work for the New York Light and Air Code? And for us, since we kind of already did that work at the deep kind of technical side of it, it was a small job for us to fit it to exactly KPF's workflow and make it useful to them. So some of the really easy projects for us are easy because, my team, I'm an engineer myself, but the rest are all trained architects. They worked in architecture companies. They know how architectural workflows and processes work, so we don't have to teach them the industry. And then we have a lot of history that we can build on and adjust and tweak to tailor the software to exactly the process that's already there.
Can you talk about what your values are then? Because I know you're serving firms that are out there to help them solve problems. But what's your kind of mission statement? I don't like to use that word, but what are your values?
Yeah, so we're architects who code. That's the kind of the short tagline.
That's your tagline, okay.
Yeah, and then what we try to do is to reduce that frustration, that waste of talent when people are just clicking around in their software, not really doing architecture or engineering. They're just moving data around. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of doing that is that these people they live a better life. It's more fun to do engineering and architecture if you get to actually do it and not just click around in your software. But also that they're able to then create better projects. And better projects can mean a lot of different things. You can make them more profitable, but we also kind of look for opportunities where there is some kind of sustainability benefit. So better carbon footprint or better biodiversity or other kind of topics. We are fortunate, it's this very small team. We get to kind of pick which customers we pursue and which countries we pursue them in. So we stay away from some countries where we really don't want to work. We stay away from some companies that don't really align with the things that we believe in, which is a bit of a luxury as a small team. But that's important for us to stay motivated and contribute and spend our expertise in a good way.
How did KPF find you? I can imagine that KPF is always looking for solutions to whatever, but I'm curious, were they just cruising your GitHub and saw that, or are there personal relationships? Because I'm just curious how you made that connection with them.
It was a bit by chance. I reached out to someone there and we had a conversation, and I was showing some of the stuff we made in the past, and they were like, oh, that could be useful. And then we got that. I went over to speak at the KPF Tech Week, and we kind of got that slow adjustment going. And it helps, of course, like one of my colleagues is Dimitar Venkov, and he's been with the company from the beginning. And he's an absolute legend in the Dynamo community. So if anyone who uses Dynamo, which 10 years ago was a small little thing for visual programming, and now it's, I think, hundreds of thousands of people use it every month. So it's become quite huge. So he was very early on, contributed to that whole movement. So lots of people know him. So when he jumps into a conversation, then, there's no question in Dynamo or Revit or like software related to those programs that he couldn't answer. So talking to him as well, they're convinced that, okay, these people know what they're doing. And, he's at this level in the world where we get contacted by Autodesk to make Dynamo run faster for Revit. So then we did this profile optimization thing on Dynamo and got it to run much faster, which is, a level of expertise that you don't find everywhere, that you don't necessarily have access to in your internal teams. But then we work with internal teams and we help bring that expertise to exactly where it's needed in the right portions.
I'm thinking of you guys as like this special operations team, like a skunk works almost, except everybody knows who you are maybe, and you're not like a secret, but it would be kind of cool if you were like the special ops team that solves people's problems and then walks away and nobody ever hears about it. That sounds kind of intriguing. But Can you talk about the inception of Reopen, like where it started? It sounds like you guys have done a lot of different kinds of projects for a lot of different firms, and you are on some stance like a special operations, like it's really custom maybe to what they need. But you also make tools, I assume, that are available more widely than that. So let's hear the story about Reopen.
Some of the tools, and I think if I remember a few years ago, Håvard came on the podcast, and maybe there's an episode actually where he goes through some of the founding story as a founder. I stepped in a little under 2 years ago, and what attracted me at the time was, this excellence in the team and the generosity of the people in there, and Håvard, of course. He's great. We've done a lot of the stuff we've done in Revit we retain the rights to it, we license it out. But for us, the product license thing is kind of 10% of our revenues, very small side thing. The main thing is that we don't have to do things again and again. So we can kind of, if you want a specific tool and it's something that we made before, we can just get access to that. And we have architects in New Zealand who uses it. We have architects in California who uses it, which are time zones that are hard for us to support a business in. So we tend to stay in Europe and the East Coast of the US for now. And then the stuff we've done for Rhino and Web is mostly stayed with those customers. We worked quite a lot on the tools that Hedwig Studio uses. I had a great collaboration with them for years and years. It's different things. There are a lot of firms out there who have really developed and good creative processes, and they spend a long time developing those creative processes. And then somehow the software they use kind of falls short. And if we're able to bring that software a little bit closer to the creative process, that's optimal. Then that, a little bit of investment each month in getting closer to that is really, really valuable.
And so when did Rio begin, and how long have you guys been doing what you're doing? So you've been there for 2 years, but it's been going on for longer than that.
So it started back in 2017, so 8 years ago, and got started on a big government project here in Norway, in Oslo. And then Håvard did a phenomenal job of getting some international architects interested and winning them over, and having a few people come in that could really help around like Dynamo stuff in the beginning, and then gradually making more software. And I think it's, being part of that early days of visual programming and moving into more text-based programming was a little bit ahead of the curve of most of the industry. And it was supporting a big change. Now, 15 years ago, I don't think we have any role called computational designer. It wasn't a thing really. And then Grasshopper came and Dynamo came. And now we're seeing this new shift come in again, where there's vibe coding where, suddenly all the architects and engineers can write their own software, and you can decide to build a lot more in the company instead of just buying from all the software vendors and having dependencies to hundreds of different software vendors. You can build a few things yourself and reduce some of the dependencies. So that shift that was in the beginning into Dynamo was a really good development, and it turned into really excellent also C# applications over the years. And now we're actually working, more on applications, but also with some customers, we work on kind of developer experience in architecture. So
what does that mean?
You have, in an architecture firm, you have design technology teams, you have computational designers, and people are interested in tech in architecture. And they are now exploring more and more the text-based coding that you do in software development. And they get help from AI. Lots of people use Cursor or Claude to get help to write code. And then it's a little different. Like, I remember being in an engineering firm, we had this kind of script hub where everyone shared their scripts and we could kind of get access to them, and nobody documented anything and nobody trained anyone, so nobody could use any of that stuff.
It's a free-for-all, and it doesn't, nothing, it goes nowhere, right? Because
exactly.
How do I know? Now I'm just going to spend a few hours trying to figure out what this does to see if it applies to something, maybe? No.
It doesn't work. And you can still do amazing things with scripting, and but then now we have this opportunity now that we work a little bit more text-based encoding, that it has the potential to scale. It still requires us to write a little bit of documentation. It requires us to maybe do some videos or some explainers, or make this information available to AI so it can explain people how to use this. But we talked to some of these teams, like, okay, how do you collaborate on code? What are good coding practices that you should have when you work?
They don't have those skills, right? Like, they don't have computer science degrees, they have design degrees or whatever.
No, I mean, to be fair, neither do we, but we've learned over the years how to do it. I think.
Nice disclaimer. That's awesome. Yeah. You're like, we understand your pain because we were there. Yeah.
When we do recruit, I always look for people with industry experience, because engineering architecture is extremely hard. It's very, very, very difficult to design a building. It's also difficult to do software, but it's much easier for us to teach software development than to teach structural engineering. Like, as a structural engineer, you train for 5 years and then you work for 5 years until you are moderately good at it. It takes 10 years to even get into it, and you're still clicking around in your software, wasting your time probably. The software you can get into much, much quicker.
What you just said goes a little bit in opposition to something that we heard at the AEC Tech Conference when I moderated that panel, when Jonathan Nelson from Populous said that he hired it was like a data scientist, or it was somebody who specialized in like dashboards or something like that. And he said, like, he didn't care if they came from the industry. And maybe in that specific case, it really didn't matter. But I'm just curious, like you just said, you really look for people with industry experience because they understand the process, the clientele, more like the actual pains of people who are clicking around in software aimlessly looking for a solution. I mean, am I headed in the right direction here? Because what do you think about his statement of not caring, because maybe that outside perspective is actually valuable, where they're going to ask more questions that we might take things for granted and just assume everybody knows, where they might actually bring it to the surface because they don't know. Yeah.
Also, I was sitting in the audience, and I wish I had this like big plaque I can hold up and just like say like wrong, like this is definitely wrong.
I was wondering if I'm glad you said that, because there's no time in a live situation to chase down all of the potential places that a conversation could go, like we can do right now, because we don't have a time limit and there's no agenda to this conversation. But I love that so what was wrong about that?
So I think, and this comes from a context where what we do, you could term like implementation services. So a lot of the stuff we make, you're supposed to be able to use it on an architectural engineering project next week, or in 2 weeks. It's rare for us to work on something that you are going to start using in a year. And, I also don't think that's good to spend a lot of your energy on these days with AI moving so fast. So it should be short term at this high level of uncertainty. But it is something where I think, and I think if I remember correctly, it was saying like, you can bring in someone from insurance or banking. They have, incredible ability to work with data. And
big data sets, lots of experience on that side, where it may be hard to find somebody in AEC who has that.
Yeah, And then, there's a couple things to that. One thing, it's going to be extremely hard to retain them. Insurance and banking are both industries that pays way better than what we do in our industry. So with that skill set, they could go back and earn more. And then there's another issue of understanding the constraints that we have in our industry. And it's hard to understand some of the inefficiencies that we have. If you just come into it from the outside, you can do that. You can have a great startup that challenges one of the inefficiencies in the industry. But as a person just coming into it and working in this company where everyone knows these constraints, everyone knows the inefficiencies, and you're one of the few people who don't really get it, it's going to be really hard to build trust with your colleagues, and they're not going to want to listen to you and ask you, can you help us with these things, if you don't really understand the language, terminology, the constraints. So I think that's another thing. You're putting them in a somewhat unfair position there. Is you need really good leadership.
Set them up for frustration. Right? You could see them being really frustrated. For example, I worked with a, I would call them like an architectural startup on the West Coast here, and we were working on a school project where we were introducing prefabrication and things like that. And this person was on their team who had come from automotive manufacturing. And they were the most frustrated person on the team every day, because why can't it just be like automotive manufacturing? What do you mean we have to deal with this problem? Like, why is that a problem? And it's constantly like fully well-intentioned. What do you like? That sounds broken. Why is it like that? It's like, yep, this is how it is, right? This is the air quotes of architecture. This is how it is. And this is the things that we have to deal with because of this is a very disconnected process, and just getting something built is a miracle, right? In and of itself, that we can actually orchestrate that process with some certainty that, oh yeah, we're going to get to the end, but we don't know how we're going to get there. Where with manufacturing and that kind of level of fabrication, it's just like stamp, 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 assembly line, right? Get it done. And they were trying to apply that to architecture, thinking that they really could. And it was just, they were the most frustrated person in the room constantly. Like, and they ended up leaving because they couldn't deal with how it was, to your point, right? Of really difficult to keep them engaged when they're just constantly running up against the brick wall of process and architecture.
Yeah. And then I think there's definitely something there. And there's also something through geometry. Like, geometry is extremely hard to solve well. We've had in our industry, we've had AutoCAD for 40, 50 years now. And, AutoCAD is extremely precise. It's really hard to match the preciseness of AutoCAD. And I think it's been attempted to bring it to the web several times. It kind of hasn't really worked that well. And there's, very few of the softwares that we use in the industry actually survive these 10, 20 years, because some of the things they've solved it really, really well. And you throw someone into a team of architects and engineers who are, geometry and space is something that's completely natural to us. We see a 2D plan and we can immediately think how that's going to be in 3D. How is that space going to feel? Where are those ducts going to go and cross each other? And that process is something you learn over years and years of, studying the plans and understanding the space and seeing the buildings being built and how all of that work. Mm-hmm. And it's knowledge that's kind of hard to just transfer to someone in an onboarding process of a couple of weeks and say like, oh, this is how the industry works. Welcome. So I think there's also something there with geometry being hard and difficult to do. That's also hard to bring people in that are more used to large databases, financial numbers or statistics and these kind of things. And then, some of the mechanics of the industry, where what's valuable and what's not valuable. Something that you can do in banking, for example, you can do lots of work on data, and it can be very, very valuable because you can scale incredibly well. And then you can do lots and lots of work for architecture, and then you don't really scale it, so it's not worth the same amount of effort. So you have to be really smart about the small efforts that you put in. So I think there's a lot of things that are different. I mean, I wouldn't bring someone into the industry from the outside, even if they're really, really good at coding for the work that we do. And I think if you were to do that, you have to be really mindful of, and provide really, really strong leadership to enable them to succeed in their role.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company Avail, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. The people that I've seen succeed who have come from the outside, for some reason, and I don't know how to put my finger on it, really cared about the building industry, really cared about the built environment. So much so that that was the value alignment, to go back to earlier part of the conversation, where they wanted to make a difference. It wasn't just about solving this problem in the paycheck, right? It wasn't about the job part of it, but it was about, like, why are we doing this, to kind of go back to that earlier part. And so they're out there, right? There are people who, and maybe it's HR, maybe it's graphics, maybe it's visualization. I don't know. It might not be, it's all of these tangential things that are part of running an architecture firm nowadays, right? It could be writing apps and scripts and doing these things. And maybe they can come from another place, but it's like they really care about the difference that they're making or that firm is making in their community in really tangible ways. So it's not to say it can't happen, but those are an even smaller amount of the people who are out there in the pool of people looking for positions in architecture firms.
Yeah, and then, that's maybe under one of the conditions it could work. It'd still be quite hard, but at least if you have that, deep passion for the built environment, then you have maybe the energy and perseverance to spend the time and effort to learn how the industry works. I still
not
think
only do you have to learn how the industry works, but you have to learn how your colleagues work, and that's got to be like how architects work has got to be one of the most frustrating environments to walk into. It's like it just doesn't make sense, I think, when it comes to most kind of corporate environments.
No, it's this has been fun to follow over the years as well. A lot of large engineering companies have gone on this acquisition sprees with architecture firms, and I was there when the company I worked in acquired a large architecture firm, and it was an interesting clash of cultures where you have this partner structure, you have this incredible drive to win and compete for exciting work in the architecture team. And, then you have the engineers who are really excited about big, hairy problems they can solve. But at the end of the day, the numbers have to add up to win something. You can't really outshine anyone on the idea or the design or things like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I would love to talk about AI. You gave a presentation at AEC Tech, and then I think after that, I saw you posted something on LinkedIn where you like shut down your subscription to ChatGPT for your team. And so, like, where are we? Where? Let's first talk about like how AI has come onto the scene, in specifically with how Reop has been doing work. I mean, you talked a little bit about vibe coding, you talked about Cursor, you talked about tools like that, and you're architects who code. I assume architects who code, for the most part today are using tools like those. And so I'm curious what your experience has been over the last few years.
Yeah. So this was, for me personally, that was one of the reasons for leaving this large engineering company I was in, was to join a small AI startup that, in the end didn't work out. And then I was really happy to find Reop, but I was right there at the beginning of the wave, getting really excited. And then I joined Reop, and there was, a lot of conversations in the industry about this whole AI thing and all the things you can render and generate with the images and everything. And then it wasn't, prevalent in the team. It wasn't something that, the team was super, super interested in. It took me a while to find out. Like, we were experimenting with different things, trying Cursor when it came out and seeing Claude Code and these kind of things. And we found, it's mostly And then, we were also actually sharing office spaces for a year, not this year, but last year, with a machine learning company that was specializing in AI. And they had all these professors, really, really clever, brilliant people. And they also showed us some of the experiments they ran in the built environment. And they were super stoked at how easy they could make something look like architecture. And we were tearing our eyes out on how horrible it would be to be in that space.
But it looks so pretty. I mean, on some level, at the surface level, it's really incredible, right? It's like, I remember some super early experiments where people were taking, feathers from a bird and creating facade systems. And it was just fantastical, right? And it's just like, whoa, this is really fun. It's really interesting. And you can see the rabbit hole like open up, and it's like, let's go into that portal. That's going to be incredible. And at the same time, if you know anything about what it actually takes to build something, you are also like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? That we're going in the wrong direction.
No, and this is exactly it. And we had several conversations with architecture firms. It's like, we need to do something in AI. And we're like, okay, which problem are you looking to solve? And they go through the problems like, yeah, we can code that. This is logic. We don't have to use this predictable models or these probabilistic models to solve this. It's not necessary, and it's not necessarily the best technical solution either. And then, I think over the last year or so, especially after the smaller context protocols came out, it's become more and more clear for me that, right now, the biggest shift that's happening from AI for our industry is this ability for everyone to code, as this democratization of coding and writing software. And then, there are definitely very cool things that are happening on the generation side with how you tell a story with images and videos. I think that's super fascinating, interesting. But it is a small piece of the whole design, architecture, and engineering of a building. The storytelling you need to do to win it, and to win over the maybe it's citizens or council, or there are some key processes where that's really useful. But it's still few percentage of the effort that actually goes into designing a building, and all the other percentages that you have to spend lots and lots of time on. There's no AI solution out there yet that's super useful for these things. It can generate text that's useful in many instances, but there's also a lot more information in text form on the internet that these foundational models are trained on. So the foundational models are super useful. I use it every day. I talk to Claude on my way to work. I asked it, tell me a little bit about Evan before this podcast. I know who I'm talking to.
All right. Oh, what did it do me dirty? What did it say?
Apparently, Claude thinks you are a Renaissance man who both does mountaineering and does author and podcaster and educator. So I think you got a lot of things right there.
I like it.
It is quite good. And then when it comes to where we are right now, you have these foundational models that are getting better and better. It's still not really valuable in your project unless you're able to give it very specific context around your project. And this is what's getting interesting in the next 6 to 12 months, is kind of how do we give our specific context, the context that we have in our firm. All firms are used to working with, we tend to call it content more, I think. Like, you have your Revit families library, you have your visual elements, you have lots of digital assets that you manage in the firm. And how do you give this to the large language model, the statistical model, so it can use these resources when you want to design something? And then you also have to give your tools. So if your tools are Rhino, Revit, or if you make tools yourself, you have to make that available as well. And then it can eventually start becoming useful for the design that you want to do. So this is something that's, to me right now, is very, very interesting. It's not something that we work that much on in Unreal, because there's still so much potential in improving some of the workflows that we're involved in, coding, like clever things that help architects. So we haven't done that much work in it yet. So it's mostly me going around talking about it, talking to the team, like what's interesting here. And then the thing where we turned off ChatGPT was actually, a conversation in the team. I was a bit surprised it got this much attention. And I'm confounded by the LinkedIn algorithm. But it
So
was someone
it
who
got
brought
attention
it up.
on LinkedIn is what you're talking about, because
Yeah.
you provocatively posted that you cut it off. Okay.
And then someone brought it up, like, hey, did you see in the news, like, it seems like Anthropic is a bit kinder to content creators than what OpenAI is. And they were referencing, the settlement with these companies that have rights to books. And then OpenAI
From the information they stole in the beginning, they've been more.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then, they kind of were forced to fess
Friendlier.
up and pay like $1.5 billion or something insane. And they were forced to delete those and, they said at least they would do that. And then, OpenAI has this New York Times court case where they're just blocking it. It's fair use. And in the team, we just had this discussion like, hey, are we like, does everyone feel like this is, and then people were like, yeah, okay. Well, content creation is important to us, and the creative domains are important to us. And then there's a small team of 10 people. It's easy to say, hey, why don't we cancel the ChatGPT subscription we have and just switch to Claude? There was not really a lot of resistance around it. Claude is also a little bit better in this specific moment in time at supporting coding.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a positive as well. But the decision really came for this kind of very quick and easy conversation around the ethical concerns. So we let it kind of simmer for a few weeks, and then we brought it back up, and everyone still felt the same way. And we're like, okay, then we'll switch. And it's not going to change the world. But I think if every company, small and big, make these ethical considerations about who are their suppliers and why did they choose them, then that sums up to something.
I mean, it aligns with what you talked about earlier with your company and who you choose to work with, and having some guardrails around that everybody on the team knows. Okay, so hypothetically, what if an architecture firm of 10 people or less wanted to switch from Autodesk to Graphisoft, for example? I mean, it's not as easy, right, to say ChatGPT to Claude or OpenAI to Anthropic as it is to say Autodesk to Graphisoft in this case.
No, that's probably true. I mean, I've heard about companies who do this every 2 or 3 years. They assess all of their vendors and they sometimes switch from Revit to Graphisoft or ArchiCAD or Vectorworks or others.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've had this idea in the industry that we have to spend years mastering the tools because they're so complex and the user interface are so many layers in it, and it's really hard to master these tools.
Or even
it's
the
really
way they go about
switch.
doing something, right? Like you think about Revit doesn't have layers like AutoCAD does, but ArchiCAD does, right? And so fundamentally, they actually approach the problem, even though they're both BIM authoring platforms, they approach it differently. And so the getting up to speed would be more difficult. The transition would be more difficult potentially.
Yeah, and I think this is going to change in the time to come. Like if you now, like the user interfaces are more single layer, it's more context aware to what you're doing. All of the web services are more easy to switch in and out of. So, if you use HyPar now, I'm guessing you could switch to Arcol or Conic or Forma, like these kind of web companies that are building the future tools of the industry.
What do you mean single layer? What does that mean?
So that's just the user interface. So if you have to click one place and there's a new menu, you click there, and a third menu, you click there, that's kind of many layers.
Okay.
Whereas if all of your available menu options are kind of visible to you, and then let's say you're working on massing of a building, the massing tools are right there, or massing commands are easy for you to access. When you move into the floor plan, then the floor plan commands and tools become available to you, so that you always have the tools that are relevant for the context you're designing in.
Yeah, sure.
But the layers, kind of single layer, ideally. You don't have long menus that pop up, and you have to know exactly where to find things to be efficient in the tool.
Software seems to get there, though, doesn't it? Right, over time, it's just more and more features. We got to move them around. We got to reorganize. We've got to, and so, I mean, you're developing software. Is that something that you keep at the at the top level to say like this is what we strive for? Because I would assume then that also means we make decisions to not develop certain things because it would obfuscate it from the user potentially, because the more and more features you have, you got to pack them in somewhere, right? Do the elements on the screen all just get smaller, or do we redesign the application? And we all know that that's difficult too.
Yeah, or does it depend on your action in the software? So, if you click the facade, do certain tools, become visible
They're
to you?
aware. Yeah, that back to your context idea. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also nice. Actually, we're starting a project now in January on discoverability with a firm that create lots of applications, and it's kind of, they find themselves recreating some of the application they made 5 years ago. So trying to think about, okay, how can we actually help users discover the right tool for what they're trying to do? It's not an easy problem to solve for sure. It's really hard to design something simple. It's very, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But then, as you add more features, you maybe want to think more of it as experiences. So if you have like an experience of creating all the drawing sets for a large building, how do you make that experience a little bit better? And then there's a completely different experience where you work with the early stage massing of that building. Those two experiences are so different. So if there are tools that fit really well with those one experience or the other, why would you show the massing tool when you're doing the floor plan? It just, there's some things there where you have to show all the features on the tools at all times in lots of deep menus that it doesn't, when you think about it, doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, it's an old paradigm, but it's like, it's a physical world manifestation, right? It's like you go to your wood shop, all the tools are in the wood shop, right? They're all there, and they are not context aware. To me, it seems like a very physical kind of analogy.
Yeah, but then, but also like in the wood shop, you don't have your land measurement tools because you probably measured the land, before you started crafting the table that's going to be in the building.
Yeah. So what's the value that you're seeing in the AI tools in what you're doing? I mean, you're really sounds like specifically on the coding side, the text side of things, and not the image generation side. But have you seen interesting things happen, useful things happen, valuable things happen? Because your clickbait article, it was like, we got rid of ChatGPT and we didn't replace it with anything. But in reality, you just went over to Anthropic, right?
So, no, actually, we switched to Claude. Or we had both, and now we just have Claude.
Okay.
No, but I think in the last 3 years, like generation has become easier and easier. And to some extent, if you work in the delivery phase of a design project, that's a nightmare. Like if you can generate complex geometry in Rhino super easy, and then send it into Revit, and the Revit model gets heavier and heavier, and you're gonna click print at some point and commit legally to those drawings, and nothing works at the end because everything's generated super fast and quick. Looks amazing, but just doesn't work with your current tech stack. I think that generation has some limit to it. The most impressive thing I saw the other day was in a completely different field. It was actually from Zapier, where I was just connecting. We have some Revit tools, and occasionally we get a support ticket, and that goes into our HubSpot. And then I missed one, and I wanted to make sure that we don't miss one, so I wanted it to post to our Slack channel. And I just went into Zapier, which I hadn't really used. I've always been aware of it, but I hadn't really used it because I didn't have the need for it. And then I just wrote like, hey, I want to connect, my HubSpot support ticket and post it on the Slack channel. And it said like, can you allow me to connect to these two services? Connect, like 2 clicks. And then it found the right form amongst hundreds of forms that we have on our HubSpot. And it found the right Slack channel between 30 Slack channels that we use actually.
You didn't even have to select them. You didn't have to dig through the menu to find them. It found them for you.
It generated everything. And then this was somewhat impressive, but then the most impressive part was that it also created this little visual programming thing that it showed me like, we're taking this form and we're sending this information to Slack. So then it did generation, but then after it generated everything, it gave me precision, where I could go in and modify and say, oh, actually, I don't really want this information. I want that information to be sent. There was a slight tweak there that made it useful. I think this is where we're still lacking in the industry, where you can generate lots of things, but it's really hard then to move into the precision phase where you move stuff around a little bit. You have to be, you have to watch your line weights and the colors and these small details that you have to get right. So that when a tool gets there, that we generate all of this, and now after we generated it, here's the precision you have to actually move it a few centimeters or a few inches one way or another to make it exactly the way that you want it.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm still kind of waiting to find that tool. There's a couple that might be getting there, but I think they're still a little way off.
Hey everyone, let's take a quick break from the conversation to pay some bills around here. This episode of TRXL is brought to you by TRXL Plus members. That's right, my incredible paid supporter members are making this episode possible. Their direct support ensures that I can continue exploring the intersection of architecture, technology, and the future of design with the leading voices in our industry directly to you. So let's talk about why you might consider financially supporting the podcast too. By becoming a TRXL Plus supporter, you're not just helping sustain these conversations, you're also gaining exclusive benefits like ad-free episodes of the show and my Leadership Edge email newsletter, where I analyze episodes and deliver the insights and key takeaways right into your inbox. Your small contribution makes a huge impact. And if you've been enjoying TRXL and want to be part of the community that keeps it thriving, please consider joining today. Head on over to trxl.co and click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit a link that I've put into the show notes. Once again, my sincerest thanks to the TRXL Plus members who have made this episode of the podcast possible, even though they aren't even hearing this ad because theirs are ad-free. Now, let's get back to the conversation. And so, yeah, not geometry, right? An analogy to what you just said, something that really impressed me was the way that they've integrated AI in text interface into Notion databases. So in Notion, because I have a lot of complex formulas, my whole life is run out of Notion. And so I have certain fields that are driven by formulas, and the formulas were unwieldy because you had to learn how to program them, and Notion has great documentation to figure out how to do that. But now with the AI stuff, it's like I can actually rewrite those formulas just by writing a sentence. And then I can say, oh, and make this small change. And it just so easily does it. And I don't have to... It's kind of cool to go spend the time to learn how to do that thing that I'm literally never going to go do again. Right? And so that's the trade-off. It's like I have to invest all the time to build a tool that is then just going to work. And I don't like that. Learning was cool for the sake of learning. It definitely expanded the way I think about the usefulness of the tool and what it can do for me. But at the same time, it's kind of a waste of time. It's kind of like architecture, right? It's like the purpose is to do the building, not to do the drawings, right? Yeah. But we have to do the drawings to get the building. And so it actually was a really fun experience in a different way than it was learning how to build the right kind of formula, because now I don't have to do all the trial and error. Of course, I could, it could do it wrong and I might have to retweak it. But at the same time, like I just want to get what I want, right? I want the hole in the wall. I don't want to know how you're going to put the hole in the wall. I just want the hole in the wall kind of a thing. So that's what I'm paying for, right?
More and more people are having that experience now that you can write, plain English, and your software becomes a little bit better. And I think that's, a little bit of magic in there. That's really, really nice. And then at some point now, if you were to share all those formulas with, hundreds of friends or hundreds of colleagues, you want to have a level of confidence that this is going to work every time in every environment. It's not going to crash. And then when you get to that level, that's kind of where we in Rio step in and we look through your code and we say, okay, you can just share it. It's safe. This is really good stuff. Or we go in and we say you need to make a few tweaks here. You need to handle these errors and there's exceptions to these kind of things. So I think for a lot of the stuff where we are right now with AI, it's, you should use it, you should learn it, you should figure it out for your own sake and how you work in your own processes, if you're making a podcast or designing a building. And then when you want to scale it, that's where you want kind of a second pair of eyes on it. Someone who does this every day and say like, yeah, this is pretty decent. This is something it's a good idea. We can take that idea and make it into something that's scalable, but it's not exactly what you've written here.
Yeah, that dependability, right? The repeatability is where prompting falls short, right? Because you could prompt the same thing and get two different outcomes, but if you codify it into a process that is if this then that, then that is something that is way more distributable. Because it's going to say, okay, well, here's all the inputs, here's the output, right? Period. Right. Versus, oh, well, maybe something new came online that it now takes into its context and therefore changes the outcome. I mean, that's very difficult to deal with, because even as a content creator, where it's just like, you wrote me this great thing that I can then use as a description for this, and then the next time it's like wildly different, right? You could be the exact same inputs. It could be my same prompt with my same whatever, transcript or whatever it is, and then that's not me. That doesn't sound right at all. That just doesn't work. That's not scalable.
No, and I think it's, there's merit to these language models who can kind of create logic on the fly, where you kind of say, hey, can you help me, place these elements somewhere that makes sense? And he can kind of try to figure out, okay, let's do these 20 steps, and then you get a result. Maybe it's something unique, and it's a good way to test new things. There are a lot of processes in our industry where there's like a command list of 60 commands, and you have to do them one after the other, or some in parallel, and you have to do it every time. Like you have to, that drawing has to come out, or you have to check the bubble health, or you have to purge the parameters. So it is a lot of these things where it doesn't really make sense to create the logic on the fly. Looks cool. You can create nice videos and share it in your social, but
right.
Probably you're better served with a command flow that's worked 100 times already. 50 of your colleagues are already using it. It just de-risks the work that you're doing.
So, what did you think about the AEC Tech or the presentation from the guy from Turner Construction, where they've deployed ChatGPT to 15,000 employees? Like, does that make alarms go off for you? Oh, cool. That would be fun to watch from the sidelines. I wouldn't want to work there. Or, yeah, that's the way that firms should be doing it.
Also, I have to hand it to him. That was the biggest surprise. I was actually talking to someone else about this yesterday, and that this was the most surprising presentation for me during the whole event, because it started, very mundane. It was very much like, AI is here, we're going to give ChatGPT to all employees. And at the beginning of that, I was like, well, there's like lots of companies are doing this. Like, what is the point of this? Why are we listening to giving ChatGPT to your employees? And that's been happening for a couple of years already. But then it took a really interesting twist where they said, okay, we tried to teach people how to use this, and then we started monitoring if they get more value from it, more satisfaction. And you had really, really interesting data, and actually they're treating this as an experiment, not an experiment that says like, let's see what happens, but more like we've done these kind of almost control groups, and we have these data points to see that, it is valuable in these contexts. So I think their approach makes it really, really valuable and useful. And then I think it's interesting to see how they can get something useful from it in many different contexts. Then I think we had in that conference conversation, I think Nathan Miller asked a really good question for our panel, like, is AI making things faster and more efficient? And should everything always be faster and more efficient? My response was no. It's not necessarily making things more efficient. When you got the image generation, you just created a lot more images than you did before you had image generation. It doesn't necessarily lead to better images. It just makes you spend more time creating more variants. Be better images, but that's not a given. You have to have that artistic eye to be able to do that. And maybe, that's the risk I think Turner's running as well. Like everyone's really happy with that. They're reporting better productivity, but are they actually more efficient, or are they just spending more time on exploring more things? That's
well,
gonna be interesting
and back
see.
to Nathan's point, right? Does it need to be more efficient, or do they just need to be more satisfied with their job and more curious about things that they can do? Because I think that's what's interesting about the design process, right? Is you don't know where the answer is going to come from. You just don't know. It doesn't come from the same place it came from last time. It doesn't, right? It's not the same solution. It's not the same team. It's not the same context of environment and site and all these things. And the answer doesn't come through a formula. It comes through curiosity and chasing things down. And somebody says something one day, and then you hear something else, and then you see something, and all of that came together to make this magic recipe of the design process and the final building. And I wonder if actually that's a more important outcome of this experiment than is it making them more efficient? Because everybody, the person in the finance office would love to say, yes, it's more important. But to get back to a point you were talking about earlier, and it made me think of an experience that I had working with, the head of our financial side of things in our firm, totally understood because he had been there for a very long time that yes, we spent more time doing this compared to that other project, or maybe more than we should have, in air quotes, but it was because of this and it led to that. And they saw that value and were able to see the bigger picture of the whole firm and the culture and the outcomes. And so they're willing to say, yep, we spent more money on that phase of design, but look where it got us and what we were able to do with that, with our marketing and with this other client that came in because of that. All of these really unforeseen connections that nobody could put together because they don't exist on paper. They don't exist in the data. They exist in the experience of people. And I kind of wonder, I loved Nathan's questions. I was joking with him afterwards because it was the last question and there was not enough time to really get in. That should have been a podcast in and of itself. Maybe I should have him on. And I thought it would have been, we should have him on again. And I thought it'd be great if he just locked the door. And it's we're not leaving until we get to the bottom of this kind of a thing. It would have been amazing. But at the same time, there's not enough time to do all that. But I think about okay, so yeah, there's this real push for efficiency and productivity and yes and no, right? And tools, right? How many times have people stumbled upon a cool way of doing something or the right way of doing by clicking not random buttons, but clicking through the interface, trying to figure it out, which gets to the root of his question. What happened to spending the time to do the thing? It's architecture has been commoditized to the point of spending less time on it equals better, because that's where the money is made. And that's rarely the case. I mean, look at the examples of Pablo showing Heatherwick's work, right? I kind of wonder if they even have timesheets at Heatherwick Studio. I don't know, right? Because the craft is really, really, of course there's deadlines, but it's how do you get to those really amazing solutions? It's through doing it. It is not by doing less. It's probably by doing more or working smarter, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, Hedwig's, the double layer of Pablo and Alfonso is a brilliant team together. We worked quite a bit with them. They're really fun and great people. I think some of this is kind of the time it takes to mature an idea or mature a design. And this is one of the challenges with the AI. I remember even 14, 15 years ago, I was contracted out as a BIM coordinator for a contractor on site. And I went out, this was early days where we did 3D IFC, Revit, BIM stuff. And, they see the 3D model and they're like, okay, great. Then we're just going to build it. And we're no, we're in the first months of designing the details here. We need another 4 months to actually get this coordinated and at a level you can build this. And they're yeah, but we can see it on the screen. It looks okay-ish. And you're just yeah, but then we have to talk about mold maturity and all of these things where it's it looks ready to build. And I think, that was 14, 15 years ago. And now I see it so much again with this whole everything AI, where you see it looks ready to build. You even have these, it looks like a Revit interface.
This is why SketchUp had sketchy lines. right? This is why SketchUp had sketchy lines. Like turn off the textures, turn on the sketchy lines. And because architects got really good at this, right? Which was, we are 3 steps from where you think we are. But we're going to show you this version because you can handle it right now. Because this is what we need to talk about and get decisions around, even though we are 3 steps ahead. And that is, like, to your point, like, people see finished product when they see these hyper photorealistic images, and there's always this concern in architecture. It's like, we can't show them too much too soon because they are going to get married to it. And we don't want anyone to get married to this yet.
No, and I think it's the time it takes to mature an idea. It's not necessarily something we can just collapse and say, like, oh, here's your AI generated building. Now you know everything and why we've made all these design decisions, and it's going to be really good for you. You know, you need to bring the people along as well. And I think it's there's definitely something in there where this very quick generated things are. Even like the computational flow dynamics images that are coming up now, it looks like air that's flowing through the buildings. There's no actual computational flow dynamics behind it. It just looks like the right colors.
Right.
And this, becomes a little bit scary. There was another presentation actually, which of course that was not his point, but was it the Unreal presentation at the conference as well, where he was kind of showing.
He's like, close enough. Yeah.
Yeah, but like people walking around and it became a pedestrian simulation. And, I spent a few years in the mobility space, and it was like, the statistics behind that is wrong. Like, that's not how you build a statistical model on how people actually walk and how pedestrians behave. And there's behavioral models behind these that are quite complex and hard to set up. And then, they do amazing visualization to make it look fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you know the field, you're like, I can't really use this for anything. I have to actually figure out how people walk, and then I can visualize it. I think there's, I really appreciate like the hard grunt work that goes into designing a building and understanding every problem that you need to solve, or doing a pedestrian simulation, building a complex statistical model for that. And the value of presenting that and having storytelling and visualization around it is really good. But doing just one of them, which is, most engineers just do the math and then don't tell anyone. So I'm very familiar with that side, but I think that's a lost opportunity. You could share it in a better way, better storytelling. But if also I just hear the storytelling and there's no kind of substance, there's no like real work behind it, it's also just like, what am I going to use this for?
It goes back to this idea of what you were talking about with firms. Like, we want to use AI, and you're like, for what, right? And picking the tool before the appropriate problem to solve. It's the same thing with this. It's like, I can't tell you how many times I sat in boardroom type meetings at an architecture firm. It's like, we want to say that we are innovative, or we want to say we're using these tools. And it's like, well, why don't we actually just do the thing and then have all the assets to tell the story, instead of saying we're doing this thing and then have to go back and build all that stuff to actually do it? It's completely the wrong way to think about it, right? It's 180 degrees the wrong way. And so I agree with what you're saying. It's frustrating to see that. And so, like, to your point, like this idea of, well, if you didn't set it up with the right intentions in the beginning, you can't, like, the end doesn't matter. If it's just a pretty picture, it's not. Yeah. It's completely flawed because it was flawed. It never started out even in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, when you have experience in the industry, you see this pretty quickly. But there are a lot of people out there that, they won't necessarily be able to tell. And, if we're unfortunate that those people are people who have, the means or the access to capital to get things built, and those buildings are there, they're horrible experiences for people, and they don't function, they don't work. And, 5-10 years later, they get knocked down again, which is kind of the worst possible outcome that we can have from a design process, that, this fundamentally has very short longevity and is a very unsustainable way of developing our societies.
Yeah. Well, I think we should start to wrap up here, at least start to wrap up. So I'm curious where you're going and what you're excited about when it comes to Reop and what you're doing with Reop. So tell us, like you said, you're going to be adding another, you're going from 10 to 11. And I'm thinking about Spinal Tap right now. Like the amps, they go to 11. You know, I can see the LinkedIn post now. So tell us where you're going, where you're headed with Rio.
Yeah, so for us, it's going to be a lot of fun in the years to come. There's a lot of new tech coming on the scene really, really quickly now, and the skill sets we have is really useful for the architecture and engineering practices we work with. So I really look forward to some of the customers we'll start working for next year. The ones we added this year has been a lot of fun, like really, really great people. And also growing the team. When we bring new people in, they always come with something, both professionally, technically, coding wise. But then, some of them, they do have side projects with art. Some have like architectural photography as a hobby. There's always like all of these dimensions to people that I find very interesting to explore. And then, we do once a year, because we have, part of the team now, there will be 4 people remote, 6 people in the office. So we try to do once a year a week-long festival where everyone comes together, or 3-4 days where everyone's together all the time. We did one in Oslo now in August. We had a lot of fun together. So I look forward to a little festival next year as well. So it's a lot around people and growing, in a slow, sustainable financial way, and making a positive impact on some of the people out there.
Yeah, so tell me about that slow, sustainable, because there's a lot of influence or pressure on startups, and I don't know if you consider yourself a startup or just a business. I mean, it's a
8
word.
years we're kind of out of the startup phase. I guess we're still a small business.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been impressed by people who can scale and be profitable at the same time. I had a leader I was working for many years who managed to do this. And it was very impressive to me where you can, because one of the others is kind of, if scale without any profitability, then you're in the startup scene and you have to probably bluff a lot of people. If you're just doing profitability, you're just cost cutting, it's also quite boring. If you could do both, then, it's a very healthy business. So, having a little bit of a profit every month, adding a few more people every year. That's something that I hope we can achieve over the coming years with the Rio team.
Well, there's also this pressure just to always be bigger and doing more, and I'm curious what you think of. Do you see that as a useful model in our industry or in the capitalistic society, or is it actually undermining it in some way?
Well, I think this is sometimes hard for some of our customers to understand. And coming from engineering, if you have 100 structural engineers, you can do 10 times as much with 10 structural engineers. So it's really linear scale with people. Mm-hmm. And then I got into the coding side of things, and I realized, I can add another 10 people, and we're not necessarily going to move faster. If I just find one that's really brilliant, that person's going to get us there much faster. And that's becoming ever more true now with AI support. So, we can code a little bit faster if we use Claude in a good way. So for me, it's not necessarily growing the team to, 50, 100, 200 people. It's more growing the impact. That's the focus, right? So the impact could be, we're able to help more firms with the same amount of people. But it could also be small things. Like we got a question for someone, we're a small firm, like how do we work with Rhino Revit interoperability? And we could have responded to that email and say, hey, here are some things we know and some things we worked with in the past. But instead we thought, okay, if we have a little bit of better impact, if we just put it on our little blog and we send them the link and say, hey, here's how we think you should do it. Share this with anyone you want. So if every small business decision where you think like, okay, how do we have the most impact with this? Then that's more meaningful to me than being 100 people, and hopefully it has a more opportunity to have a more positive impact on the industry as well.
Yeah, this idea of sustainable growth is a foreign concept, I think, in a lot of, especially in the startup scene, right? It's like go fast, break things. If you're not going fast enough, and then pivoting. Because you got to use the buzzword pivot. And because you have to, because it's not sticking. It's not sticking fast enough. It's the adoption isn't happening. There's all kinds of reasons, but also pressure to keep up with. And so it's good to see companies that are intentionally just methodically chipping away at creating sustainable businesses. Because I mean, something that strikes me with your culture and with your values is that there is work-life balance. And in order to achieve that, there needs to be some level of like a solid foundation in this, right? Where things aren't just crazy all the time at work, right? It's because it doesn't have to be crazy all the time at work.
No, and I had conversations with colleagues this week that said, hey, they're planning on working a bit next week because they have a few things they didn't manage to finish up, and I was saying like it's probably not that urgent. Like you just leave it for pick it up in 3 weeks when you're back from the vacation. It's still going to be there. Our customers on vacation as well. They're not going to look at it before they come back. It needs to be really de-stressing to work if you're going to work next week. And some of the people said, oh, it actually would help me just to put in a half day next week, and I would just relax much more after that. And it's like, okay, put in the half day. And then some people said, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe it isn't as urgent as I feel like it is. And I think in a lot of business, we use kind of urgency, and we use also the word crisis way too much. It's not really a crisis on the same level as if you're in an operating room or dealing with a humanitarian crisis or something like that. And, this language also creates a pressure to do things really fast. And, some of the things we made are used on some of the biggest projects in the world for several years now. It needs to work. And if we just run really fast and break things, then there are, some firms out there that don't get their work done. And, we feel responsible to them and to make sure that they can use the small tools that we made that, if they break down and we're not there to help them, and then, they have to spend hundreds of hours to do it in the old fashioned manual way. Yeah.
Like earlier, you said there's certain time zones you kind of stay away from because, and I assume it's because you can't be there at their call when it needs to happen, because so many times that's exactly what it is. It's like, oh shit, I need that right now, right? I can't wait until tomorrow or for the email chain to work its way through the system. And it's like, I need to just pick up the phone and be able to talk to somebody. And if you're asleep, they can't do that, right? So that's interesting that you actually, because there's a lot of firms out there who take on projects who don't know how they're going to staff them, right? They're just trying to create the backlog of work, or they're trying to, because the incentives are misaligned between the people who have to deliver the projects and the people who have to win the work, even in the same firm, right? And they're not saying, well, can we support this appropriately for the time period and on the schedule and the budget and all of those things, and really holistically looking at what's capable.
Yeah, and I think it's also a little bit about being responsive to the people you work with as well. That we have a pretty nifty tool that enables you to manage content across Revit models. In a big project, you split it into several models, and you want to manage content across. And we saw that several years ago, and several of our customers are using that in large projects. We were talking to Bjarke Engel's group about this, about a year ago, and they said, "Oh, this is useful, but could you add color schemes to it? Because we have a project where we need the color schemes to be the same of all the buildings that we're making." And we said, "Yeah, we can probably do that." And a couple of weeks later, we made that adjustment in the tool, and it's kind of one of those things that then they ended up starting using the tool because they also felt like they can make it a little bit their own, and they could make it fit their process. And being responsive to that. If they were then, based in New Zealand, the back and forth would be a bit more complicated. And we would probably be able to adjust the tool for them and tailor it a little bit, but maybe not on the same short time span that we did in that case.
Final question. Where'd the name Reop come from? What is that?
That was before my time, but it came.
You have to know the story.
Yeah, I do. There's Howard wrote a nice blog post about it. They did this naming workshop with a lot of reimagine, rethink, reconsider came up as words, and then the re word was there all the time, which is nice. Like our current strategy is called reimagine because I think imagination is one of the most important qualities we have as humans. And then Oppe is kind of I'm told it's like a expression from some south of the US, that it means like discovery is something, like Oppe is like, and then re-op is like rediscovering something.
Cool.
It was short, kind of easy to put on a web page. I think also the URL was available, so that's also always something you have to factor in these days.
Okay, so I lied. Last question now for real. What is the deal with so much activity in Oslo, Norway, that area? I mean, to me, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on out of that spot in Europe. What's that about?
Oh, there's several factors that plays into that. We're a strange little country. My grandparents' generation was a very, very poor country. And my parents' generation became a very wealthy country. So we can afford, free healthcare for everyone, free education. Everyone has a master's degree in something. And then adopting and the whole society, digitalization was kind of something that was quite early introduced. And then we were fortunate in our industry that the government building office, they really leaned into everything BIM back in 2006-07, and they started requiring this for all of the major projects. I was on the project team for the new National Museum that we were designing, and there was quite strict BIM requirements for this. And when this happens in the big projects, then a lot of firms develop new skills in this whole digital side of things, of design and engineering and architecture. And the roles, BIM coordinator, BIM manager grew up out in the industry quite early, in the early 2010s. And then, it became more and more digital. So it's really the foresight of some of the government bodies that require this in the contract very early on that kind of built the skills in the industry. And then, more and more companies are mandating this now on the country level. So I think Portugal is doing it, Ireland is doing it, and more geographies in the world are doing this now. And it's just a chance that Norway did this 2007-08 or something like that for all practical purposes. And high education level, very digital society, a high cost of salaries. So you try to be efficient with things. So that's probably one of the things, because Spacemaker turned into Forma. That was a huge acquisition here. Now Consigli got acquired by Ecom. So there's two large acquisition out of Oslo in the last 5 years, I think, or 10 years.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really great conversation. I know we went all over the place. I didn't expect to talk so much about leadership, but I'm glad we did, and culture and incentives and everything that we got to cover. So Joachim, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I'm going to put links to everything that we talked about in the show notes for this episode. And I hope you have a happy holidays with your family and your team.
Thank you, Evan. And likewise, I really, really enjoyed this and hope to come back sometime in the future.
All right. If you watched all the way to the end, thank you. That actually means a lot. I have 2 things I'd ask of you before you go. 1, hit subscribe right now if you haven't already. It's totally free. It takes 1 click. And I'm really trying to get to 1,500 subscribers. We're not there yet, and every single one counts. If this show has been worth your time, that's the easiest thing you can do. Number 2, if you want to go further, if you want to support independent coverage of this industry and get ad-free episodes of the podcast, plus my full Leadership Edge newsletter, head over to trxl.co and click the join button. The link is in the show notes. $12 a month, and you'll be one of the people who actually makes this possible. All right, that's a wrap. Subscribe, share it with someone who would get it, and I'll see you in the next one.